Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, now we turn our attention to security. Well, the president did mention some part of it as well in that NEC meeting, but there are several perspectives, several actions that are being put in place. But what kind of results are we getting? Are we doing something right, or what are we doing wrong? How do we correct any of this to get better results? I mean, now we've got Captain Aliyu Umar here with us. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
You know, it's always such that what can we do without security?
Nothing.
That's the answer.
Nothing.
So, but I haven't seen that particular comment on Wednesday that came through from the Chief of Army Staff, and there's been lots of reactions about it as well. In fact, guys, let me go to that if I can. Well, he was quoted to have said on Wednesday, quote, "It is unfortunate, but the truth is that almost every setback the Nigerian Army has had in our operations in recent times can be traced to insufficient willingness to perform assigned tasks or simply insufficient commitment to a common national and military cause by those at the front lines." Are things falling apart in the Army?
Not necessarily. If you recall, about 60 days before the Chief of Army Staff made that pronouncement, I was in the studio and I raised certain observations and opinions, which of course drew the ire of certain people who decided to bring up certain concerns and were giving me options of outcomes. Let me seize this opportunity to say I'm open to any of the outcomes. Any of the outcomes, I'm open to it. That aside, you see, I appreciate the courage of the service chief to say it as it is.
So, is this what it is?
That's what is coming from the horse's mouth. You see...
Well, isn't this an admission of failure?
No.
Incapacity for people to obey your command? Those days were never heard in the Army, that you're given an order, you can't carry it out.
In those days, we're now talking of these days.
Oh dear.
Okay? Let me tell you something. There is what we call combat fatigue. Combat fatigue is an old, obsolete term. It's now called post-traumatic stress disorder. It's called battle ennui. It could even be called, to a lesser degree, job monotony. When you put human beings to a task and they do the same things every day and churn out the same results, you're going to get what you call ennui, monotony, boredom. To a higher degree, it could be a form of stress disorder. Stress disorder need not be after the entire battle. Stressors come and go.
But there must be causative factors to this particular one, because number one, there are different cases, and PTSD can be different symptoms and causative factors to it. Some, for instance, in this case, we've heard several times them talking about inadequate facilities, equipment to fight with. So if you don't have that, definitely people don't want to. What can they do when they're not armed? So isn't that circumstance a little different than when you actually have those equipment to fight with, then you're doing the same thing?
That's what I'm saying. They could be different circumstantially, but the aggregate effect on the big picture is one. You're either doing it well or you're not doing it well. And if you recall my last outing here, I was talking about results. Results-driven operations. Results not necessarily from the top strategic, but right down to the foot soldier operative. Targets have to be set. And even in providing the equipment, the provision of the equipment have to be what I call results efficient. We must match the right equipment with the right people, with the right circumstances.
Sorry, there is something I don't understand. How is...
Understandable, you're not a soldier, so...
How is fighting a shape-shifting security, is a set of shape-shifting security challenges monotonous?
Good. I'll tell you how it is monotonous. To do that, we have to decompose it down to the chores the tasks. Okay? And to make you understand it, I'll use a scenario you can understand that is outside of combat. The only thing is, there is one common factor there, the human. We're going to do the psychoanalytics of a human. If you were 9 years old right now, I know you're not, and I bought you a brand new toy, I give you 2 weeks. It's going to be bored. The reason is simple. The average human, regardless soldier or civilian, is a creature of habit, and he's social in nature.
But he is fighting security. He is
Something they're
fighting
trained
for
for.
security.
Agreed.
He's doing what he is trained to do.
He's doing what...
Today it's kidnapping. Tomorrow it's banditry.
That's where we're trying to...
The other day it is what do you call it now? Boko Haram.
That's where I'm trying to marry it up for you. Marrying up for you simply means that same person you use to solve problem A, which is a security problem, cannot be applied to a problem B, which is a security problem, but with a different dimension. If you recall, I made you an example of a football team. They're all footballers, 11 of them. So why does the coach say Chamberlain warm up at certain times and says Makinde come out at certain times? After all, you were all trained to be footballers. So we must be able to match our human resource units to situations.
So in which way then does what you're saying now marry with what the Chief of Army Staff has said?
What the Chief of Army Staff has said underscored what I said 2 months ago in this studio. There are phases of war. Within the phases of war, there are stages. And each of these stages have to be results driven. If you mark performance via results, you could even cut your losses at hourly basis. You'll be able to see where it's not going wrong.
In other words, we are not getting results.
We're not getting results because the system itself does not interrogate non-performance.
Of who?
Everyone, even the rifle. You see, if this pencil ain't writing well, you interrogate why it ain't writing well.
So
we're going to be doing...
the Chief of Army Staff, I'm sorry about that. The Chief of Army Staff says his men are not committed enough. That's like the summary of it.
Summary. Let's decompose that.
Please.
Why are they not committed enough? There could be economic stressors, financial stressors, psychological stressors, different stressors that inform the intrigue or the dynamics of being there, boots on ground. And that's why results, or let me use a term that is more conversant with you, corporate governance, targets, KPIs, milestones.
In other words, there is no plan.
Well, there is a plan, but the plan is not really suited to the challenge.
Well, Captain Umar, you know, I mean, we know that in this country, even growing up, almost to get one simple information from the army, classified, top secret, as little, I mean, journalists had a hard time. They still do anyway, but it's a little better these days. For him to have said this in public, it speaks volumes, because many wonder, wait a minute, ordinarily, these are the kind of conversations you have top level security meeting or the security council meetings. And when they come out of those meetings, they're usually tight-lipped. They could smile at the cameras, but they don't say a thing. But to have said this in public, this speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yes, it speaks volumes. But for me, as an observer, when I heard him say so, I went back to the link of the last program and listened to myself again. And I was like, where did we find convergence here? Anyway, let me tell you something. Why I do not have any qualms with what he said is some years back, we had a service chief, who had cognitive dissonance. What is cognitive dissonance? He was seeing it, but he wouldn't admit it. And what happened later? He came and said his hands were tied. And I said here on this studio, were your legs tied? Why didn't you walk away? The same cognitive dissonance informed his demise to our own loss. We lost a very high-starred general to the same things we were trying to bring about. So you see, The first person perspective may not see the errors. It's rare with us for people to actually admit errors in the first person perspective. From the second, third person perspective is considered criticism or anti. That's okay. But today, we are seeing something that is a bit strange, I admit that, where the lead person is shading off that toga of cognitive dissonance. So put it right there and point to it. Now that that has been said, what do we need to do? What we need to do in civilian parlance, excuse me for saying so, I'm a civilian too, we need to micromanage. Micromanage everything to the button on that soldier. That's where you can cut losses and track results.
How do you micromanage this situation? Because there could be, perhaps, could this be a demonstration of some sort of discontent within the rank and file, within the officers? If they've been in certain positions, they're not seeing promotions coming in, people are leaving the army, they've got questions as to why they were sacked. Is the chicken coming home to roost?
If we say discontent, there will always be discontent. Believe me, there cannot be nil return on discontent. Even if you were to increase salary, somebody will feel, I should have earned more, or we should have earned same, and what have you. So I could say, from my own sideline perspectives, and the figures we've reeled out on sums of money being doled out, that if it's in terms of finances, if it's in terms of promotions, if it's terms of reviews on salaries, much has been done. But that's not where my concern is. Where my concern is, there are those seemingly trivial things that are not written anywhere in any books, but account for a lot. They are called intrigues. And we are masters of intrigues. Nigeria. Okay, I'm a Nigerian too, born here. Now, if you want to cut that out, if you really want to burn the mess out, you micromanage and hold every single item on the way to results. So it's clear. This is what you have to do. What do you require to do it? I require this much to do it. Take this 0.5 much. What time do you have to do it? I need 1 hour. I'll hold you to that, sir. Take 1 hour, 20 minutes. And if you don't meet that results, down to even cleaning your rifle. If you can't,
but you
well,
know,
sorry, Jimlin, the statement is clear. He said the truth is.
the truth is.
The truth is. Now that's something that he
Explicit.
he has ruminated over for a bit.
Explicit.
He also said it can be traced to insufficient willingness to perform assigned tasks. How will micromanaging affect that? And if you don't mind me adding this one, will that not demotivate the troops?
No. There's nothing as demotivating as tying those boots and standing there in the sun, in the rain, come whatever, and it's normal to them. But that's physical. Psychologically, I tend to tell people that motivation need not be an incentive. The truth could also be a motivation. Let me tell you something. Back to your question. When you come out and say, this is the situation, you have threaded the needle, you have bailed the cat. Okay? For me, the high point is it underscored what I stood for and what I said here. It can be done. Back out there on the field, we need to ensure that what is on ground zero is in tandem to what the chief is being fed.
If you were on the field, Captain Umar, and you heard your general say this about you in public, not to you directly, say this about you in public, and you hear it as a reported speech, how would you feel?
The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be asking myself, what have we not done right? You see, I'm a dispassionate person. You should have observed that by now. I really, not that I don't have emotions, but they seem to be mild. Okay? I don't have issues with you correcting me even in the studio. Because somewhere along the line, I've learned to listen and not to hear. There are two different things. We hear generally as Nigerians, we don't listen. Hearing is the ability to register noise with your ears. And listening is the ability to make sense of what is being said, regardless the emotion, the ego, and what have you. So I could hear the news without listening to the news. I could hear my lecturer talking in class and I'm just browsing. I'm not listening. If you listen to what that chieftain said, you see that this man bailed his cat himself. And that for me is one massive challenge. If I was in his team, I'll be mighty excited.
What if the commander-in-chief heard this for the first time in public? How would he react? How would he feel?
If the commander-in-chief had this for the first time, it depends on if he's like me, downright dispassionate, or if he's ego-reading. Oh, I have done wrong, I have blundered, so you have to call a party, call the elders, lock the doors, switch the lights off, and talk to me in private. Those who work with me will tell you, I correct you right on the spot where you did it, so you can remember it quickly. So for me, it's not about whether it was said in public or it was said posthumously or whatever. The idea is we have bailed this cat. Now what are we going to do about it? My recommendation is we must drive operations to results, down to the last scratch of equipment.
But you need to understand why this is the case in the first instance, wouldn't it? Before you now decide on what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. Because many have said this has been a long time coming.
It's been a long time coming. I told you I just said some things that were akin to these 60 days before. But let me tell you something I have learned about failure. And may I here recommend for you a book called Black Box Thinking. Black Box Thinking was written by Matthew Seed. And he gave examples, glowing examples of tragedies that occurred. But how did people come out better, wiser, stronger? They interrogated the failure. They didn't hide failure. There's nothing to be ashamed of in failure. Failure is just the world telling you that, man, you didn't do something right.
And when you know you can't do further, is walking away, can it be considered as failure?
Well, walking away, for me, it takes courage to look you in the eye and say, Sir Chamberlain, I thank you for having me, but I think this is it. I don't consider that failure. I consider it honorably quitting. So for me, you could call me shameless if you like, but I've killed that aspect of me that runs away from failure.
Let me ask you this, Captain Umar. Do we have enough soldiers?
Enough soldiers. I wish we could have more, and I'll tell you why.
Because, that could probably be another reason why these people are like, be afraid.
It's not in the physical.
Mm-hmm.
It's not physical. It's psychological. It's in the mind. I read somewhere again, thoughts become things. You could have 1 million soldiers and still not do much. But then, to answer your question about whether we have enough or we do not have enough, take one soldier, random, be it an officer or a policeman, whoever, take one uniformed man. Let's decompose him. What does he contain? What does he constitute mentally, psychologically, professionally? When you decompose that soldier, let's assume he was a robot. We had to put a CPU of knowledge into his head. What's on that CPU? If we had to put welfare motivations into his memory bank again, what is in that welfare? Let's write a program, for example. Let's write a program, and this program should be called The Soldier. Until you do that, go and bring 1 million. They will just be all of the same. That's micromanaging.
When some of these security issues occur in different countries, there are different reactions up onto the citizenry. We know the security consciousness and or awareness, the level, gradations of that in the citizens. But in our case, having seen what's playing out at the moment, how would you, because you also see and interact with people on a regular basis, how would you see our own response? How would you rank our response or rate it? Do you see us, perhaps we've improved our security consciousness such that there are certain things that we do now that you think, okay, we're responding right as citizens in this country?
As citizens in this country, please, let me re-educate us, or let me unlearn something we always do. Security consciousness is not the word. Security consciousness is a state of being. Security threats awareness is the word. Once your threat awareness quotient is high, security consciousness will dawn on you naturally. Today, I see people beings, Nigerians like me, shaking hands with death, living there with it, because awareness ain't there. I see accidents waiting to happen, and even the regulatory bodies just pass by because awareness, knowing, ain't there. Okay? And now that is where our challenge as practitioners comes in. We must begin to do a lot of auto-suggestion and repetition. Don't call somebody and say, be security conscious. It's just like you telling me have faith. How? Nobody tells you how to have faith. Everybody wants you to have faith. No. Tell him the threats. Make him aware and leave security consciousness alone. It will dawn naturally.
So what are some of these threats that people are not aware of?
Some of these threats are simple. That lopsided electric pole is an accident waiting to happen, and you decide to set your shop under there. You make excuses. They haven't come there to repair it. That's no excuse for you to go and die. It's a threat. Let me give you another better example of a security threat. That official who takes money to do your health center and will rather spend it than do it is a threat. Irresponsible governance, irresponsible social conduct. That man who wants to walk into the filling station smoking or with his phone on is a threat. And when people begin to talk them down and say, hey, no, the threat awareness quotient grows, and you now begin to see a gradual receding of those at-risk behaviors. The same applies to governance. When the politicians know that for every step you take, people are going to respond and people are going to react whichever way, then you begin to act a bit more responsibly with restraint.
How much success can we get if we perhaps vote more money, at whichever level, to any of those security architecture that we have now as presently constituted? How much results can we get if we just perhaps increase the amount of money or funds we, pump into those areas?
It's not about how much. We could put all the money on this planet in
Can we get that without changing the security architecture?
The architecture itself needs to be modified. We need to adapt our security architecture to us. We are popular, or we are well known for adopting. There's nothing bad with adopting. We send sons and daughters of Nigeria out there to do courses. They come back home, they've adopted certain body of knowledge. That's good. You have to adapt it to our scenario. I once wrote a paper about indigenous democracy. What I meant in that paper was you adopt democracy and adapt it, indigenize it to suit us. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is it's not about money. I am all for financing security because without it, you got nothing.
Let's forecast.
But the results must match the expense.
Okay, in 30 seconds or less, but would you go actually, what do you see happening in a couple of months if we keep going this way?
In a couple of months, if we keep going this way, we're going to remain this way.
That's not good, because we should have remained the other way.
So we can do things differently and get different results.
We always try to see what we can do to improve. That's why we do some of these things. So always a pleasure to have you on, Retired Captain Aliyu Umar. We're back in a moment. I turn our attention to another matter. Stay with us.